Here's something I'd mentioned getting around to some time ago, and unfortunately is taken till now to get to it. We're going to replace the fuel filter on this XK8 with a K&N brand one. You can go with whatever brand you feel comfortable with. I like the K&N brand. As you see here, we've got the filter is right in front of the driver's side. That'd be the left side of the car. Right in front of the driver's side rear wheel. You got right over here. So there is a small 8mm bolt holding this clamp around the filter. And of course, there's a hex style nut on either end that holds the pipe into the filter. The line nut is a 16mm. The nut on the factory filter is a 21. Now on the aftermarket filter I have, it's a 19mm. I've already got my wrenches in place. I just need to take my 8mm nut loose here, and then I should be able to pop these lines loose and drop that down. Now, of course, during this process, fuel will come out. It shouldn't be a ton. You do want to have a catch pan here in case it does start coming out, and just be ready to put the the new filter on fairly quickly. That way you don't have a whole lot of loss of fuel. Heat shield here looks a little bent. That's because it is. I just kind of bent it back a little bit with my hand. I'm going to push it back over when I'm done. Not a big deal there. We don't change these all the time, so it's not like I'm going to sit here and bend this back and forth and break it. Rather than pulling that whole heat shield down, which is quite the chore, I just bend it out of the way a little bit so I can get to that 8mm nut. When you put the new filter on, not put it on backwards. Hopefully y'all can see that. It is labeled out on this side. On my new filter, it has an arrow that points in the direction of flow of fuel, but it always flows towards the engine. Be sure and put your filter on the right direction, otherwise you're going to be back underneath here unhooking it and flipping it back around to the correct direction. So to get it off, the new one back in place, this one actually did maintain a decent little stream. Of course, you can pull your fuel cap in case there's some sort of vacuum on it to help release the vacuum, keep it from flowing. But anyhow, to get it off, we wound up having to take loose the bolts I mentioned before. But also wound up having to take loose the covers here at the fuel lines. There's one there, one here, and one here. Took those loose so I could get a little movement out of the fuel line in the front, so I could get that out of the way. Once I was able to get it loose, I was able to shift it over to the side and then undo the back and then slide it out. Like I said, I actually did have quite a bit of fuel come out of this one, so there's a good chance you'll have that on yours as well. But just be ready to do that. Have these loose already. Just going to simply put these back on. They just have a plastic cover with a plastic nut that runs down on a stud that's in there. Once I get that done, everything will be back in place. I'll bend my heat shield back in, and that's the fuel filter replaced. I expect to not have to replace that for quite a few miles. So here we are, heat shield bent back in place. Our fuel line retainers are back on. Those as you screw them in, you can just kind of push on either side and they'll snap on. Just make sure you get the rubber grommet that's in there in place. You may have to use a flathead screwdriver to kind of pop that seal around it. You can kind of see up in there, you see that little seam. There's a rubber flap that goes around either side to kind of protect that hose. And we had this final one here. Everything's back together and ready to go. Now you may have to turn your engine on. Of course, this has an electric fuel pump. Much older cars will have a mechanical fuel pump, so you may have to crank on it for a little while on something like that. This is a much more modern car, so pretty much turn the key on and you should be able to hear the pump run for a moment. Turn the key off, turn the key back on, listen for the pump to run again. You want to do that several times. I wouldn't say any more than about 3 to 5 times, and you should have enough fuel pressure at that point. You should be able to go ahead and start the car. One last note on these, be sure and double check once you have everything going. Kind of peek underneath here. You know, wipe down with the dry cloth, clean it off with some brake clean or something like that, and make sure that you don't have any seepage. You sure don't want to have a fuel leak. That can be a real nasty problem.